Thank you, Professors Gates and Professor Abiola, and thanks to the Du Bois Institute for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be here, and a real pleasure to read both Colson. While we were upstairs, Professor Gates said that he was our Ralph Ellison, and I don't know which one of us has been saying that first. So
I said she was the Zora Neale Hurston. She's not that part back.
I'm going to read from my first nonfiction book, which is After the Dance. I'll just read two short sections from that. And actually, if were it not for a family situation that I had my aunt who raised me, who I always talked about, passed away a couple of weeks ago, and she was ailing for a while, and that's the only reason that I'm not at Carnival this week. So, this book is about Carnival, but it's also about life and about death, and someone told me that they found it odd that a book about Carnival starts in a cemetery, which as this book does. But so I'll just read these two sections, and then after we'll have a talk with both of us. The chapter in the cemetery, and it's very brief, is called Carnival of the Dead. And as I mentioned, I have always liked cemeteries. I guess I was odd in that way, and one of the reasons that I like to read this is because of a woman we met in the cemetery who told us a wonderful story, but also that in Carnival, like if you go to any place right now where there is Carnival, especially a place where things are bleak, but Carnival is that spark in the middle of bleakness at this period. So this is Carnival of the Dead, from After the Dance. I have always enjoyed cemeteries, altars for the living as well as resting places for the dead. They are entryways, I think, to any town or city, the best places to become acquainted with the taste of the inhabitants, both present and gone. The cemetery in Jacmel is no different. In fact, it is downright colorful in its vibrant and disorganized mix of old and new architecture, a carnival of stone. I asked a friend, the poet Rodney Saint-Éloi, who is traveling with me, to accompany me to the Jacmel Cemetery. Rodney works for the Cultural Affairs section of Haiti's oldest newspaper, Le Nouvelliste, and is the co-director of one of the few publishing houses in Port-au-Prince. And since he has written a long poem that includes a verse about cemeteries, I figure he won't mind coming along. Besides, we have traveled together before, and he has always shown a singular reverence for the dead, going as far as dipping his hands in rivers and streams and raising his fingers to his forehead to connect himself to those who have crossed the waters, literally and figuratively, before him. In that way he is a kindred spirit, so I know he won't think it strange if I say hello to the graves, which is something I do now and then whenever I'm in a cemetery. We head out mid-afternoon when the heat will least interfere with our walk along the Avenue Barranquilla, the central road leading out of town. Once we pass the corner where the Carnival's official viewing stand is being built for Sunday, the sidewalk abruptly ends and a large white and blue public transportation buses, which are repainted school buses from the United States, double their speed. The necropolis of Jacmel is off the main road, down a hill with a row of houses on either side. Crossing a wide, unpaved road, we reach one of its side walls. A few sections of the wall are decorated with advertisements, one for a cine club where you can sit in a small room and watch a kung fu or Hollywood feature a year or two out of the theaters, and the other a commercial for a construction store called Kaidodo. On the walls are also fading campaign posters from the last presidential election, which took place the previous November, images of the recently inaugurated President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, his bespectacled glare fixed on the hills surrounding the cemetery as he appears to be whispering his campaign slogan, La peine en tête, la peine en ventre, peace in the head, peace in the belly. The other writing is plain old graffiti. I find one unheraldingly appropriate. It is a simple word over a hole in the wall just large enough to stick my head through. B-Y-E. Bye. We enter through the cemetery to the back because the wall is missing a stretch there. Rodney points out that this is a good way to enter a cemetery, for it alerts the dead that we are only on a visit, as they must have learned by now that if one doesn't come through the front gates accompanied by a large entourage, one is probably not there to stay. There's a saying here, houses don't have owners, cemeteries do. In that spirit, this cemetery seems to belong to everyone. Through it runs a well-beaten path which the neighborhood people use as a shortcut. Teenagers on their way home from school, young men en route to a soccer game, strolling lovers. To better see the cemetery requires that we zigzag through it, crisscrossing the pebbles soiled between the graves. Rodney asked an old woman passing by what the bright green vines with crimson berry-like buds at the foot of the tombs are called. The old woman's knee-length black dress, mourning garb, suggests that she has recently buried a loved one here or elsewhere. Gently tugging at the short salt and pepper plaits framing her wizened face, she looks into the distance over the uneven rows of old graves and new mausoleums and speaks in a soft, almost whispery voice. Ces fleurs couronnent la Vierge, she says. These are the flowers of the crown of the Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary, she tells us, who does not have the heart to leave her children by themselves in death, gardens their graves to keep them company, she adds. After Jesus was entombed, the Virgin Mary went to the site and wept so much that her tears rained on the ground and created these vines, the green leaves representing her uncontrollable sorrow and the red buds symbolizing Christ's shed blood, the cause of her pain. And the reason you see these vines sometimes standing at the foot of the grave, she says, sometimes crawling around and over them, sometimes somewhere in between as if kneeling, is because they represent all the physical stages of the Virgin Mary's grief. And now these same vines grow in all the places where Christ's children are buried. The Virgin Mary's children are buried, she says. We walk from the older graves to the newer mausoleums, painted in bright yellows, pinks, and blues. They are as elaborate as simple as the taste of the owners and their families. Some are built in the shapes of houses with rain drains protruding from the rooftops, steps leading up to the front galleries, an interior room as if to receive visitors. The flowers of the crown of the Virgin Mary are so high around some of them that it appears as though the mausoleums have their own gardens. Unlike the older tombs, which were meant for one person, the contemporary mausoleums are family affairs. Rodney points out one that's labeled Famille Edner Tudbon, with only the name of the apparent patriarch painted in red block letters at the pinnacle. The others entombed with Monsieur Tudbon would remain as overshadowed by their progenitor in death as perhaps they had been in life. Other mausoleums look like small churches with pitched roofs and steeples topped by a cross. The crosses can be interpreted in many ways as symbols of Christianity, Christ's crucifixion and death, as with the Virgin Mary vines, but also as representations of the guardian of the cemetery, the Vodou divinity Baron Samedi, the patron god of the cemetery. During my early childhood in Haiti, the dictator François Papadoc Duvalier would dress like Baron Samedi. Donning a black hat, dark suit, and coattails, he was reminding us all that he literally held the key to the cemeteries and would decide at will who would be the next inhabitants. A 1963 Life magazine article quotes Duvalier as saying, "When the Haitians ask me, who is our mother, I tell them the Virgin Mary. But when they ask, who is our father, then I must answer, no one. You have only me." We are finally beginning to see our way to the front gates when we happen on a few older mausoleums that we cannot quite categorize. They look like a blend between Mexican redondos and miniature Roman pantheons with vaulted domes, arched doorways, and folding shutter doors. One of them has its front doors wide open and appears empty inside. Peeking in, I say, "Hello," then notice a discarded condom in a pair of torn women's stockings, which seem to have been abandoned after a moment of passion. I walk in further only to face a dense concrete wall, behind which the graves reside. Stepping back, I whisper, "Excuse me," feeling as though I'm only one of many who have trespassed on this particular dead in recent days. As Rodney and I exit the cemetery through the front gates, I think of a verse from a poem called Ton chant est immortel, Your Song is Immortal, by Jacques Melbourne Émeline Carriès, who is a journalist as well as a poet. Loosely translated, her verse read, "Look, how am I going, but I am staying. You are taking my soul with you, and I watch over you. I am no more than a shadow, and I tremble." That evening, Rodney and I make our way to Sivadi La Plage, a hotel near the beach on the outskirts of Jacmel, which has a restaurant on a raised terrace overlooking the bay. More than anything, I have often come back to this place for this. In the pitch darkness out over the water, every now and then there is a sudden flash, like an abrupt shower of stars diving in one straight line into the sea. The first time I saw it, I thought it was raining somewhere far away in the mountains. I was convinced that it was a quiet, dry lightning storm, of which we were only witnessing a faint spark, opening and closing the sky before us, with neither the clamor nor the inconvenience of rain. Rodney thinks he knows where the spark is coming from. It is a spotlight from one of the neighboring islands, he says, a distant electric tower, a passing ship, or the American Coast Guard cruising the Caribbean waters for drug lords and refugees. But like both the old woman at the cemetery who told us about the flower of the crown of the Virgin Mary and the poet Emeline Carrière, I want to spin my own tale. I think perhaps it is the trembling shadows from the cemetery sending us sparkling signals from across the waters, reminding us not only of the spark but also the brevity of our carnival. This next part is a very short section about actually the carnival's connection to literature, and one of the people who wrote most accurately about the carnival, and two characters in the carnival in particular that interested me, was René Despeste. And being used to reading fiction, this feels like a lecture to me. But this part, it's about Despeste and the carnival, and this very particular character named Adriana, who's sort of taken over the town. This chapter is called Adriana in Jacmel's Dreams. Jacmel's resident goddess is Adriana Siloé. One of the most beautiful women in town, Adriana dies at the altar in the middle of her wedding ceremony. Her body is exposed at the square for a public wake before her funeral, except she's not dead. It only appears so. Her apparent demise was caused by a man with mystical powers who shows himself as a giant butterfly. Adriana becomes a zombie. A few hours after her burial, Adriana is exhumed from her grave but manages to escape, running off to the mountains where she's mistaken for Simbilasus, the spirit of spring and fresh waters, and is invited to accompany a group of migrants to Jamaica. This is the premise of René Despeste's Adriana dans tous mes rêves, Adriana in All My Dreams, a celebrated novel set in Jacmel. Born in Jacmel in 1926, the poet-novelist Despeste is one of Haiti's most prolific and best-known writers. Even though he's been living outside of Haiti for more than 40 years and has never returned, Despeste draws upon childhood memories of the 1938 carnival season for his 1998 novel, and in it has created a character that lives far beyond the pages of his book. Because Adriana's death takes place during carnival season, the novel offers first-hand descriptions of perennial carnival figures, two of the most memorable being the Chaloska and the zombie. The Chaloska, a character in military garb with a protruding mouth and claw-like teeth, is based on an actual military officer, Charles Oscar Etienne, who terrorized Jacmel in the early 1900s with group imprisonment, summary executions, and arson, destroying entire neighborhoods. By Despeste's account, the old Chaloska bands, which were formed to caricature and playfully protest military abuse, carried signs on their backs that read, "Colonel, it will get worse later on," "Commander of household tribulations," and "General of damned vindictive rods." There would be no signs on the back of the Chaloskas I would see on Sunday, however. Signs were not necessary. Everyone would know who they are. As a child, there were moments when, even though I didn't go to the carnival, it came to me. Every Sunday afternoon during carnival season, a band of Chaloskas would stop by our house, crack their whips, and growl at us from the street. Upon spotting them, I would quickly run and hide, far enough away that the Chaloskas wouldn't catch me, but never too far that I wouldn't be able to safely observe them. For some reason, the shallow skies focus particularly on children who can either run away from them or confront them with a simple rhyme, which is supposed to make them go away. Shaluska mpape osimunuye. Shaluska, I'm not afraid of you. You're a human being. From my secure hiding place, I would sing this rhyme, never venturing close enough for the shallow skies to hear my voice. Shaluska, I'm not afraid of you. You're a human being. A human being as opposed to what? I was not sure then, but when I think of it now, I guess this was a way of dematerializing, defanging a monster, making him ordinary. In the carnival on Sunday, I would say this rhyme with no fear for the very first time in my life, as the shallow skies would stroll by me, ignoring me to chase children, many of whom, raised on television movie monsters, would laugh as they recited the rhyme, as if they already knew that the only way to subdue a fear of mask is to bring the mask close and uncover its hollowness and theatrical imposture. In the carnival on Sunday, I would also see a zombie, one with a white sheet covering its face and body and heavy chains wrapped around its shoulders, chest, and waist. I would remember how Depest once explained why he had never returned to Jacmel after having left it in 1959 during the reign of Papadoc Duvalier. Jacmel is no longer Jacmel, he had said, comparing the place he'd recreated in his novels, the Jacmel of his youth, to the current Jacmel, which he had seen only on film and in photographs. He referred to the more contemporary Jacmel as a zombie. Watching the carnival zombies on Sunday, I would also remember my uncle's wife, my Aunt Denise, waking me up one morning some 20 years ago to listen to the radio as an announcer reported that a few dozen zombies had been found wandering the northern hills of the country in a semi-comatose state, and that their loved ones should come and claim them and take them home. As a child, it was those zombies that frightened me most, because they had been discovered not during the carnival season, but during a less festive, more ordinary time. And aside from feeding them salt at close range, as the legend says, there was no other way to help them return to their former selves, no rhyme to sing from a safe distance to make them go away. Like many people, my Aunt Denise had concluded that those found zombies were actually former political prisoners, the likes of which had once been locked up by Charles Oscar Etienne, prisoners who were so mentally damaged by dictatorship-sponsored torture that they had become either crazy or slow. My Aunt Denise, like many others, had doubted that any relatives would go and get them for fear of being locked up themselves. On Sunday, I would see a less frightening kind of zombie, the carnival kind. Watching its breath rise and fall beneath a white sheet, I would reach out and touch it unafraid, for aside from loud music, lively dancing, and street theater, this is what the carnival is really for, I am learning, to exorcise old ghosts and fears. With my hand on the zombie's back, I would lean forward and whisper, "Zombie, I'm not afraid of you. I know you're a human being." And I would wish that some of the relatives of the zombies found in the northern hills had gone and claimed them and had invented their own rhymes, their own songs, their own stories, and salty potions to bring them back to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwidge. That was wonderful. Can you hear me okay in the back? Audrey, is it okay if we open those doors? You can stand with holding the doors open, and that way more people can hear. Is that all right? You can open that door there. And I can't help you in the back. But for those of you, like Selwyn, if you come around here, you can hear better. For those of you who are packed up against the bathroom door, trust me. Great. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Colson Whitehead. The legend of John Henry is one with which we are all familiar, of course. It's been told to every American schoolchild. John Henry is fabled to have been the strongest railroad worker who ever lived. And one day, in a contest of man against machine, John Henry died outracing a steam-powered drill that was designed to replace him. Throughout the 19th century, we heard this song. And through that 19th century work song entitled John Henry Steel Driving Man, the story traveled across the country as the railroad was built, marking the steady rhythm of the workmen's hand drills as they drove steel into rock and cleared the way for newly laid track. The song evolved over time into a variety of ballads sung by workmen, by prisoners, by saloon denizens, and by children alike. As the story grew, so did its number of verses. And John Henry, as folk hero, grew to a stature of mythic proportions. The story became timeless and is inextricably interwoven into the very fabric of American culture. There are as many variations of the song as there are memories of John Henry's story, and just as many theories about whether or not John Henry was a real person. In the retelling, everyone agrees that John Henry was an extraordinarily tall and powerful man, but even the color of his skin is often in question. As myth has it, John Henry was variously a freed slave, a person black as coal, a person chocolate-colored, white, someone always free, someone who had never been a slave, someone a slave, someone even a mulatto. However fixed it might be in the American imagination, John Henry is both a story and a melody, often half remembered, one poorly understood. Half remembered, half forgotten, the story is a product of our collective history, as well as our collective imagination as Americans. In his novel John Henry Days, Colson Whitehead engages us in and helps us to make sense of the complexities of this story and invites us to look more closely and examine who we are as a people, and by a people I mean as citizens of America. With keen observation and compelling wit, Colson Whitehead reimagines both the legend and the hero and invites us to go below the surface of an ostensibly simple story, taking us on a multifaceted journey of race, class, and ultimately of American identity. The central narrative spine of the story is an interweaving of two main characters, John Henry and Jay Sutter, a cynical journalist. Is it Colson, where are you? Jay Sutter? Jay Sutter, thank you. You corrected me once before, and I forgot how you corrected me. John Henry and Jay Sutter, a cynical journalist. We joined Jay Sutter in my home state, West Virginia, writing a puff piece for various mass media venues as the site of the first annual John Henry Days Festival. Jay Sutter is much more interested in the, shall we say, the complimentary food and engaging free drinks than he is in African American history. In one of the most vivid scenes of the book, Jay Sutter is choking on a huge chunk of beef and almost dies, while a little boy sings the ballad of John Henry. The scene symbolizes a collision between the hollowness of mass media and the deep import of the legend. It is at once satirical and disturbing. You get the sense that Jay Sutter is choking on his own corrupted morals. This comparison invites you to replace cultural veneer with cultural substance and self-examination. What begins as a satirical commentary on modern American culture and on the frivolity of mass media becomes a penetrating examination of our common history and our complex national identity, to borrow a phrase from Ralph Ellison. One gets the distinct impression that Colson Whitehead chose the legend of John Henry as a primary vehicle for his novel, in part because the story is so very open to interpretation, and the ambiguity of the hero's identity makes him a universal figure. Whitehead uses this platform to introduce a variety of secondary characters who bring the central themes of the novel into sharp relief. He masterfully weaves the voices of ancillary characters throughout the novel, from a Jewish songwriter and inebriated blues singer to a Harlem businessman, a folklorist, even an historian. Through a multiplicity of characters and constantly changing points of view, Whitehead engages us in their interior struggles of self-reflection, provocatively raising more questions than he answers. Structurally, Whitehead uses a traditional linear narrative approach, interspersed with secondary narrative sojourns, to create a richly textured literary tableau. As well as being a common postmodern narrative device, of course, Whitehead's digressions into individual voices reflect a fragmented consciousness that has long marked African American literature and resonates with the best of the African American literary tradition, at least certainly since the great Du Bois himself. The conversation that Du Bois initiated about the duality, as he called it, the duality or double consciousness of African Americans became a signal contribution to the notion of the fragmentation of self, a defining condition, of course, of modernism. The multiplicity of identities is now understood to be a basic aspect of all human existence, but it was Du Bois, I think, who said it first. Delving into the particular to speak to the universal is what, of course, art or a classic of literature always does. Using the particularity of the Negro as a metaphor to examine the human condition, Whitehead brilliantly reprises and adds new layers of investigation to our multifaceted struggle to define our collective national identity. Whitehead's writing is a vivid mixture of syncopation and fluidity, almost as if the continuous chugging and the inexorable motion of a railroad car were never far from the author's mind. The recurring theme of the railroad in Whitehead's novel is a familiar and powerful metaphor, of course, in American literature from the late 19th century onwards. The railroad as metaphor signals a sense of fluidity and transition, a mix of identities coming together in one place. In a place, however, that is not geographically fixed. The railroad is also a metaphor for change and an opportunity for connection between disparate people. Even before the railroad became a familiar African American literary device, it was indirectly present metaphorically in 19th century slave narratives, because the Underground Railroad was the sole route for the slave from slavery to freedom. The railroad as metaphor allows us to examine specific instances of change, struggle, and finally self-definition in order to understand larger issues, social issues such as race, and universal issues such as the identity of the self. Colson Whitehead was born in Manhattan a short 32 years ago. As a young man, he was inspired to become a writer through the unusual route of being an avid fan of Stephen King. During his undergraduate years here at Harvard, like Helen Lee, who read so beautifully last week, and Andrea Lee, who read with Jamaica Kincaid. Where's Jamaica? Right here. Whitehead found his own voice, and with it a distinctive and unique focus on race in America. Following a brief stint as an editorial assistant at the Village Voice, he became a regular writer as the newspaper's TV critic. His groundbreaking first book, The Intuitionist, published in 1999, received glowing reviews and won the Quality Paperback Book Club's New Voices Award. Furthermore, it was a finalist for the prestigious Ernest Hemingway Pen Award for First Fiction. The next year, this talented young author received the Whiting Award. Avoiding the well-known phenomenon of the failed second novel, Whitehead's John Henry Days has been received by critics with as much enthusiasm, if not more so, as his first book. Paul Gray of Time magazine describes John Henry Days as a narrative tour de force that astonishes on almost every page. And the New York Times Book Review declared that the novel was funny and wise and sumptuously written. John Updike enthusiastically wrote in the New Yorker that Whitehead's second novel does what writing should do. It refreshes our sense of the world and lauds the book, and he goes on to laud the book as ambitious, a finely chiseled work of art. Awards have followed praise, and the novel has been named Book of the Year by the LA Times, the Washington Post, the San Francisco Chronicle, and one of the 5 best novels of the year by the New York Times. This year, Whitehead was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Critics Circle Award while receiving the New York Public Library's Young Lions Fiction Award. The Anisfield Wolf Book Award happily added its name to his list, echoing Ishmael Reed's evaluation that this author, and I quote, takes on a multitude of issues with a rich and probing imagination. His reputation, Reed concluded, is likely to soar. Whether weaving a tale of gendered perception or reimagining the story of John Henry, Colson Whitehead definitely helps us to wrestle with the insistent ghosts of American history. Not unlike the hero of John Henry Days, Whitehead is driving us forward, keeping the complex work of understanding who we are as a society on track, inviting us to reinterpret our history and re-examine how we construct our identities. Through his novel, we keenly feel the cultural reverberations of John Henry's drill. In short, Whitehead exhorts us to welcome the Herculean task of defining American cultural identity. His work includes an inherent caveat that we not let the lure of mass media and our current technological revolution distract us from fundamental questions of self. who we imagine ourselves to be as individuals, as races, as ethnic groups, as genders, as citizens of this great nation. Colson Whitehead is a rising star of fresh and penetrating insight and dazzling literary skill. He invites you to explore how to locate yourself in our cultural landscape. He lays bare the complexities of what it means to be an American. Indeed, he may very well be, as Edwidge Danticat said earlier, the emerging Ralph Ellison of his generation. Ladies and gentlemen, Colson Whitehead.
Well, thanks for that incredible introduction. I'm sorry, it's just a little me here. But obviously, thank all you guys for coming out, and thanks to the Du Bois Institute, my alma mater, for having me here. And I'm really glad to finally meet Edwidge Danticat. It's been years. One of the great perks of this job is that you actually get to meet people whose work you admire, so I'm glad you're here. I guess I always like to start out readings by reading a little something by an artist who's inspired me over the years. So I'm going to read a poem by William Drayton, not as well known as he should be. And the poem is called Can't Do Nothin' For You, Man. It's from a volume called Fear of a Black Planet by Public Enemy. William Drayton also writes under the name Flavor Flav and likes to insert his alter ego into his poems sometimes. So Flavor Flav actually makes an appearance in this poem. Some things you should know. Shell's Answer Man. In the mid-'80s, the oil company Shell had a line of commercials that had an answer man in the commercials who would answer your questions about cars and stuff. There's a reference to Calvin's. That's a Calvin Klein, a famous designer. Oftentimes in the work of hip-hop artists, they refer to consumer items. So this is called Can't Do Nothin' For You, Man. Running for your life by the knife, running from your wife, yipes. You should have stuck with home, your mind to blow your dome. It was you that chose your due. You built a maze you can't get through. I tried to help you all I can. Now I can't do nothing for you, man. I can't do nothing for you, man. You got all these people on your back now. I can't do nothing for you, man. Flavor Flav has problems of his own. I can't do nothing for you, man. Go lean on Shell's Answer Man. I can't do nothing for you, man. You jumped out of the jelly into a jam. Making love the wrong instead of right. Gotta beat cat burglars through the night. Cop told your girl, her name was Cheryl, about a rooftop crime to steal her pearls. Uzi down the bullets in a gun. Just microwave themselves a ton. The law, they tried to help you all you can, but they couldn't do nothing for you, man. Flavor Flav is the son. Public Enemy #1. Got you running from the gun, pow, of a brain that weighs a ton. Can't face my facts that's on the shelf, 'cause you want a handout for your wealth. Eating welfare turkey out of the can. I can't do nothing for you, man. I can't do nothing for you, man. You want $6. For what? I can't do nothing for you, man. You better, man, kiss my butt. I can't do nothing for you, man. I'm busy trying to do for me. I can't do nothing for you, man. That's the way the ball bounces, gee. Bass for your face, yo man. Bass for your face. Can't do nothing. Bass for your face. Nothing for you. Bass for your face. I tried to tell you. Rock that shit, homie. Yo, G. Rock that shit, homie. Listen. Rock that shit, homie. Ain't trying to hear that. Rock that shit, homie. Ain't trying to hear that. Kick that shit. You're on welfare. Kick that shit. Your mother's got gold nipples. Kick that shit. You got a rip in your Calvins. Kick that shit. Wash your butt. I think the question that Flavor Flav is asking us is whether or not good deeds are possible these days, and what's the value of an altruistic act in late-stage capitalism. I think the answer is, I can't do nothing for you, man. I'm busy trying to do for me. I guess what I really love about Flavor Flav is that his love of language. I love those final 3 stanzas where he sort of just capitulates to language's failure to, commute anything when you really get down to it. Hence the base for your face, kick that shit kind of litany that he gets to in the end. And what are we to make of that rhetorical device in the last stanza, that maternal figure who appears with the golden nipples? I like to think, if you've taken a reference to Shell's Answer Man, oil, capitalism, that he's trying to say that we're all just sort of sucking at the golden teat of capitalism. And I think that's a lesson we can all sort of think about and take away from today. I'm going to read from my book of essays, which is coming out in the fall. It's called The Colossus of New York. It's a series of 13 short impressionistic essays about New York City. And I got the idea from a chapter in John Henry that's sort of in the middle of the book when the country fair is about to start, and there's sort of overture to that section, trying to link the fair in the town of Talcott, West Virginia with all fairs. I'm from New York, and you can go to like the 6th Avenue Street Fair, or the 8th Avenue Fair, or the Italian Day Parade, the Italian Day Fair, and it's always the exact same fair because the same vendors just go from fair to fair. So no matter what they're celebrating, it's always the exact same thing: the same Italian sausage stand, the same guy selling underwear and socks, even though it's not really appropriate. He got a permit. So in that chapter in John Henry, I was trying to link this fair that's in the book to every kind of fair. So in these essays about New York, I'm trying to link. Each essay is kind of different, but for example, the Central Park chapter, I'm trying to link Central Park to all sort of parks in big cities. So I think there's, no matter if you're from Philadelphia or D.C., there's a kind of relationship that you have to your big Central Park. On the first day of spring, you put on your first day of spring T-shirt and head out, and you have your little ritual. And so no matter what kind of city you're in, there's a certain kind of essential nature to all cities. So that, what I just said. So I'm going to read this chapter. I'm going to read. It's called Downtown, and it's different from the other parts of the book because it's not necessarily about a one place. It's not about Central Park or Brooklyn Bridge. It's about a mental landscape called downtown, and so. This is my downtown. Perhaps it overlaps with your downtown. You be the judge. I call these essays. Some people give me crap for that. I don't care. So it's called Downtown. Jumping rope, punching the air, and shadow boxing especially. The prize fighters warm up for the big bout. So much on the line. The mirror in the corner counsels, keep your fists up and your head down. Then the bell rings and it's out of apartments, out of workplace personas, into streets, into nighttime guises. Twilight is a mask factory. Happy hour descends, this low fog. It's ladies' night or discounted Jell-O shots or 2 for 1. The bartender supervises distribution of watered-down stash, picks up bits of conversation. Other people's lives empty her drop by drop. Solitary drinkers share cautionary tales through posture. He collects coasters from all over the world. This one he's got in spades. This is the beer to have when you're having more than one. Sitting at the bar waiting to be picked up like in the movies, or merely saved. Eyes slide from stool to stool, fingers running across rows of books. Browse this library shelf, linger over spines even as you are browsed in turn, examined, checked out. Certainly there are a few volumes yet unread. Pull the next personality out of your back pocket. Maybe this one will do the trick. He overhears his words coming out of someone else's mouth and wishes his complaints were not so common. Pace yourself. Things are just getting started. They tumble down museum steps after taking in this season's big exhibit. She feels so much more comfortable parroting critics with a bona fide ticket stub in her pocket. When they went into the art house movie, it was light out, reckoning the surcharges on matinees. What do you feel like doing? I don't know. Everybody else knows where the hot new restaurants are. They don't get out as much as they used to, haunted by the beady little eyes of the babysitter. Depending on what's going on in the rest of the world, for whole minutes, he's the worst waiter in the whole world. Protocols for dealing with complainers are taped up by the kitchen door. Think saliva. Seething over appetizers, they save it up for home so they don't fight in the restaurant. It's nice to have an activity or hobby you can share with your spouse. These two have decided on spite, and it's brought them closer together. Unlikely as it is, for once they're the well-adjusted couple at the table for four. Eyes roll when he orders off the menu. That looks good. They eat here once a month, but something about this meal makes them realize things haven't worked out for a while, and they'll never return. Count down the symptoms of food poisoning. Would you like dessert? We have a wide assortment of bitters. This must be the place. It's not. This particular street address does not exist. In another city, perhaps, but not this one, or maybe in the future, but not now. Then defectors open the door and it begins. He swears he's been here before, doesn't know a single soul, lost in the cocktail party. Who to talk to? Anyone. Drain the melted ice again. Go to the bar, hit the bathroom. By the time you return, the party will have aligned in your favor. No such luck. Planting this rumor is harder than it first looked. Gardeners advise patience. Things take root or don't. Given the choice between two parties, that guy over there will always make the wrong decision. Case in point. No prying a certain type from the hors d'oeuvre table. For the last half hour, she's been trying to gain converts to grudges, but no such luck. What does she see in him? He's so transparent, old enough to be his daughter. For half a minute, they inhabit the dream city that lured them from their hometowns, but then discover nothing solid beneath their feet, and down they go. Quicksand occurs most frequently in movies, then comes parties. When they finally teach coffee table books to walk and talk, the market will fall out of the trophy wife and boy toy business. Hipsters seek refuge in church, Our Lady of Perpetual Subculture. There's some discussion as to whether or not they're still cool, but then they are calmed by the obscure location and the arrival of their kind. Keep the address to yourself. Let the heathens find it for themselves. Wow, this crappy performance art is really making me feel not so terrible about my various emotional issues. He has to duck out early to get back to his bad art. 3 cheers for your rich interior life. May it serve you well come rent day. Beer before liquor, never sicker. This one's on me. Somehow he ends up buying every round. Hour by hour the customers change, grow humps, horns, scales. The little noises they make. Her boyfriend's out of town. My college roommate's in town. My friend's band's playing downtown. He made too many plans with too many people and things will not turn out okay. She's a little worried because at midnight the new legislation goes into effect, and the draconian save the drama for your mama laws are really going to cramp her style. Hit the town, it hits back. The newspaper contains bad directions to the hot new spot. Suddenly they're on empty streets in unreckoned neighborhoods and must go deeper into darkness before safety. Corners and alleys out of metropolitan fable, bricked up doorways, newspapers, stunt doubling for tumbleweeds, streetlights, gallow, footsteps of roving thugs, they ask. Can you hear me, they ask. Is that you beside me or is this the end of it all? Then music enters deep tissues. They see the lights and the mob. But that was real fear, and what if word gets out that they're still capable of fear after all these years? Count on one thing, count on this. Night keeps its mouth shut. Nightclub doors are shut. This is Rent-A-Bouncer's most popular model. They never blink. New satanic advances make it possible for them to actually appraise the souls of aspiring concert-goers. Seen a certain way, the velvet rope kinda smiles. A delegation of corpses staggers by on structurally unsound heels. She read an article where it said formaldehyde is in this year. Simple economics. If they only admit the beautiful people, who will pay the cover charge? And they said his shirt was loud. Pantomime desires. One by one the gang goes off on adventures. On waking next afternoon they'll compare notes. Design flaws of the rich and famous. Knock politely on the bathroom door. People are up to no good in there. It's very suspicious. Watch out. It's the nightly running of the anorexic assistants. They squeeze by easily. Everybody's looking so good. Everybody's so well put together. I just want to say, keep up the good work, troops. The DJ has scrutinized evolution evolution and knows the back door into reptilian brainstem. The beat cries mutiny, recruits limbs and hips, strips this vessel of volition. Apparently this song is very popular. Lewd dances trigger responses. Still the wallflower after all these years. If he could just dance up to somebody and start doing that, whatever that's called. Akimbo things banish drinks to the floor, elbows, heels, hands, and heads. Beware the lumbering man-child at 10 o'clock. They tend to wave their arms when they dance. She looks down at her hips, not half bad. It's a full moon. Lunar effects are readily observable in emergency rooms and ATM vestibules. People need more money, if only they could withdraw common sense. Friends put friends up to ill-advised behavior, talking to that woman, putting up dukes, stealing furnishings. She's been following him for 20 blocks and he still hasn't noticed. The streets at this hour are low comedy. They chant, "Girl fight, girl fight." Why does the crazy person pick on him? Is it that obvious? Recognize them from high school and flee. Past the jazz joint humid from solos, past the local bar with the earnest singer-songwriter. After this gig, she'll have enough for a new rhyming dictionary. Bumping into the shop clerk after hours in this new context. Worlds collide. There's a cop. Seemed like a good idea at the time, but now he's going to have to explain how he got this scar an average of 3.5 times a week for the rest of his life. If the victims all got together, they could trace back their misfortunes to this one cursed payphone. It's the only one for miles in working condition, and everything people say on it turns out bad. Urgent telegram from the Ministry of Unhappy Thoughts. Been thinking, stop. No good will come from this stop. Like the moon, you're only good and visible a few days a month. Exerting influence, pulling up white caps. The rest of the time falling away, cut up into parts, and nobody knows where you are. It's so cold. Just a few more blocks, dear. Maintain the illusion tonight will be different. Wheel in the extra generators if you have to. Plenty of seats in the predictable cafes, no waiting. What do you have? The menu never changes. Things are pretty much status quo with the sexual tension, friend. Make a note to ramp up machinations for next week. Boys' night out collides with girls' night out over some confusion as to who has the right of way. Perhaps you recognize him from such bungled seductions as Your Front Stoop and Darkened Hallway at the Christmas Party. She's convinced herself she has no secret plan for this encounter, waiting for the opening in conversation to reveal the true purpose of this meeting. When it comes to romance, he never met a lesson he didn't learn. No, she's never cheated on him, but if you put it that way, it almost sounds like a dare. 2 drinks past the point of being able to suffer chance encounters with vague acquaintances, relatives, or people from work. They will report back. One by one, we are becoming unrecognizable. But wait, there's more. Under the big top, in tiny rooms of polite talk, in cattle car taverns and cavernous clubs, citizens line up for the same amusements, the rigged games and the broken rides. I like your fez. Still plenty of time to suck up, air grievances, expose character flaws. The most important person in the room possesses a gravitational field, and cocktail napkins waft toward him. Aim for the soft underbelly. That's their vulnerable point. Anybody got a mint? She must be sleeping on the job because everyone's acting as if they see her for who she truly is. Folks get by on their favorite props, old jokes, some cleavage. Anecdote 7. Test run anecdote 7. Twice as efficient as anecdote 6 and only half as long. They applaud his wit. Not a third of the way to the punchline, it's clear the joke is going to bomb. From their reaction, that word is no longer used in polite company. Did you know that smiling politely burns up the same amount of calories as speaking your mind? He confesses his love when the room momentarily clears. Everybody returns as she's about to make her response. They used to be married and now divvy up the room like they once divvied up friends. Dare you to cross this line. Some rub wedding rings with thumbs when that creature comes into view. He studies her posture as she talks to that dashing stranger. Something is setting off alarms. Smoke, no doubt. $10 says they go home together. Suddenly realizing you're talking awfully close. Everybody else seems to have left, and what does that mean? Somebody stole your coat. More nightmarish, please, if you insist. This is exactly the sort of behavior her therapist warned her against. He dresses like his friends so they won't suspect he's unlike them. To preempt rejection, she dresses to exaggerate her difference, when the true enemy is not the world's disdain, but its indifference. He is surely the next item in a dreary procession, and cannot be seen for all those previous disappointments. Over-explain your latest career decision. How can he even show his face around town after the latest setbacks? People spare a minute or two relishing other people's setbacks before their own inadequacies distract them again. This is his umpteenth pint, but he has a hollow leg or some sort of emptiness in himself, and doesn't feel the least bit tipsy. What they take for her air of mystery is merely a side effect of her medication. Something's going on under the table. Gargoyles have clambered down from rooftop areas to replace his friends, but he's not sure if he should really do anything, because they're quite funny actually, and much more supportive than his real friends. It's called a tip. Impress them with your selections, jukebox guru. Press the right buttons and she'll be brainwashed into the cult of you. Soapbox, the better word, for these pamphlets contain his philosophies. Have your songs come on yet? All over town, passive-aggressive jukeboxes delay departures. Every selection pulls them this way and that, sad and out to sea, unless they outwit the undertow of minor chords. Tonight the song you always despised strides from the jukebox full-bodied, and you hear the lyrics for the first time, understand the lyrics for the first time after all these years. This new you with an older soul, now it's your favorite, all this time singing the wrong words. Some of them have already decided where this night is going. None of them have commented on her engagement ring, so she knocks everybody's drinks over, accidentally on purpose. He spills his guts. It was the last sip that sent him over the edge, but she has her hands full with her own loneliness. She's not about to take on his. Reach inside to muzzle the broken part of you that is now talking. Last call. This is good night for anyone with a lick of sense. Anyone with a lick of sense is calling it a night. From here on in, there are consequences. One more for the road. He pretends he needs convincing. The binge is going swimmingly. Thanks for asking. The adjectives that describe the bathroom are so scarce as to be an endangered species, protected from poaching by government regulation, so use your imagination. So much for the breakfast date. With every passing hour, she scratched off another appointment, and now her whole day is free. Rumor has it they're open after hours. Something in the way they say, "See you soon," crystallizes that their friendship changed months before, and in fact they will not see each other for a long time. It's been arranged. Leave separately and meet in 10 minutes. No one will notice. Everybody knows. The little noises they make. We should hang out sometime. We should get together. We should do a lot of things we'll never do. Drunken ladies are crammed into taxicabs by quick-witted friends, out of reach of predators. He won't wake up. This is the last hand. Bet it all on this. Few of them profess to be actors, and yet they are natural for these curbside improvs. The whole clumsy erotic theater of, which way you going? Do you want to share a cab? They don't want to go home. Someone's waiting for them, or no one. Remembering too late that he's insufferable on long cab rides. Now showing the native in his cups as he slips into his avenues. Buckle up for safety. Ride with him and sooner or later you'll hear him say it. I used to live there. His finger jabs as if to poke a hole into night. I used to live there. On Broadway and Fulton and Riverside and Houston, he's goddamned irritating. Can't keep his mouth shut. I used to live there. In crowded movie theaters when it turns out the location scout knows where to get the best 50-cent hot dog. On long walks, while flipping through random books of photography, while flying overhead on jet planes. I used to live there. When they least expect it, he'll say it. Apropos of nothing, he'll say it. Because if he hasn't lived there, he will someday. There are always other apartments waiting for him. There's always more city. Held fast by red lights in key spots. At the site of yesterday's accident, there are shreds of metal and tiny cubes of glass. Each time the light changes tires, spread it far and wide, until it's an invisible layer of sorrow across the city. He used to live there on a corner. Who lives in those apartments now? Who's using his old phone numbers? Quick math says there's no way he could afford the apartment he grew up in, and now he's in exile in his own city. What's there to say as he passes it and all the others? How to communicate this feeling to friends or people who might care. Immensity of the debt, poverty of citizens. What's there to say as you pass the humble places that helped you out in ways you cannot understand, that were there for you on certain nights when you had neither friends nor cab drivers, only keys. The light changes, almost home, none too soon. After all that worry and the rough seas, night runs aground. Some of them made it to shore after all. He knows a place where they can grab breakfast. Look at the time, look at me, look at them holding hands. They talked all night. While everyone else went mad, they found each other. Not made for each other, but maybe made out of each other. The same substance, the way the city is one substance. Every inch of it from one end to the other. Solid, immutable, unbreakable. Everybody out. Last stop. Look at the sky. Toward the east side. There's sunlight in its trademark colors. Sunlight charging broken glass. Sunlight over tenements at last. And we're safe. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you both very much. Edwidge, if you could come up, Colson, it's question and answer time. Come on up, take the mic. Audrey, are you passing a mic again, or someone doing that? Please. Are we doing a handheld or not? You can just use this. Great. Questions, comments? Yes. Could you stand up and say your name, please? Heather Harding.
Are you going to speak louder?
Yeah, that's right.
My name is Heather Harding. I'm a doctoral student at the Ed School here. I enjoy both of the author's work. And I had a question actually for Mr. Whitehead about his use of gender in the first novel. And sort of if you could talk a little bit about why you chose a female character in that setting and what drew you to that type of story.
By the way, you'll be able to buy all these books that you're going to be hearing about right over there, and the authors will be willing, graciously, I believe, to sign them.
Surely. So the protagonist of my first book is a woman named Lala Mae Watson, and the reason I just picked a woman protagonist was just sort of to grow as a writer. I'd written a novel that's in my basement somewhere that had a character that was very much like me, a kind of overeducated hipster in New York, and it was about overeducated hipsters in New York, and it was really not that good. So I figured for my next book I would just try and learn about various things like plot, and also not to have a character that was very much like me. So really it was just sort of like an impediment I put in front of myself to try and figure out a different kind of character, figure out a third-person narrator instead of a first-person narrator. And in terms of the story, the first novel is sort of I call it a fake detective story, and it takes off from a lot of detective novel conventions. And really that was sort of just a choice I made early on to try and figure out how to do a linear plot. I was reading a lot of detective books, and if you read them sort of back to back, you get to see you get to see the strings, the sort of the beats of where people are betrayed, the reversals, and so by using a detective novel structure, I was able to figure out how to make a plot.
Great, thank you. Yes, questions? Hands, questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Question for both authors.
Your name?
Scott Stiles.
Scott?
For each of you, why do you write?
A small question. That's what we like. Edwidge, would you start?
I get the dissertation question. Why do I write? I guess I never felt like I had a choice. I just it just felt like a compulsion or something.
Yeah, there's nothing else that I'd really be good at. So I'm sort of stuck by the poverty of my skills to stick with this profession.
Yes, Marcus.
Yeah, my name is Marcus. I guess kind of follow from the question, why do you all think that you were both chosen to read together? What similarities or differences in your styles do you think complement each other?
Yeah, it's not a question for us. I think it's hard enough writing these things and reading them without sort of figuring out how you fit in with other people and people you like. Sort of, I guess, I don't know. I have no idea.
Marcus, since you're my student, Why do you think they were chosen to read together, Marcus? Come on, Marcus, why do you think? You obviously had some feelings about this, otherwise you wouldn't have asked the question.
So I was hoping the authors can enlighten it.
Do you have any? Who's good?
Same generation.
Same generation. Well, same generation. That's good. That's how Next question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Christian. You said you knew you had to write that compulsion. I'm curious, what were some of the books that you've read up to that point where you're obligated to write? You said, if I write something close to that, I'll be happy. What were some of those top 3 or 4 that just really, you still look back and they drive you?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it varies depending on what book I'm working on, actually. I mean, I think I don't know. I'll just name the predictable yada yadas. So, but I think with this book, I think think of like the sort of narrative style. I think I was drawing on from like Dos Passos' camera eye, his point of view stuff in, say, the USA trilogy. From Jeffrey O'Brien's essays, he has very sort of fiction-y, non-fiction-y essays in his book Dreamtime, The Phantom Empire. I can't recommend Moby Dick more than I have, so Moby Dick. Ishmael Reed, always a fun influence.
Edwidge?
Yep. I think early on for me it was a big influence was like just the storytelling, just all storytelling, and then because I had to go between languages. Like when I came here, I had to I had to learn English, and so reading was in the beginning. I would read books with dictionaries, and so. I think the very first book I read, was I Know Why the Caged Birds Sing by Maya Angelou and Paul Marshall's books, and then I went back to reading books, Haitian literature books, because we hadn't. I was in my time we weren't taught that in school in Haiti, so just reading. I was reading a lot. In the beginning, not to learn how to write, but just like reading to just see different things. But now, like since I've done the travel book, like I can't stop reading travel books. And the most recent, like I read John Edgar Wideman's The Island Martinique, and which is a very personal travel book. So just you get, I get into like periods, like when I read just very short books, or when I read very long books, or when I read, just in clumps.
You like Nightfall?
Yes.
How about Paul Brewer? You like his travel book?
The one about Nightfall?
Yes.
I'm Vijay. I'm Vijay with a question for Colson. I'm amazed by your narrator, like how they know everything. How did you find like such an authoritative, omniscient?
In that piece?
Yeah, I think partly in John Henry days.
I was trying to do a good job. I guess in the same way that I said a certain number of impediments for me, and with the Intuitionist, with John Henry, I actually wanted to try a lot of different voices and a lot of different narrative styles. So that was something I knew was going to be in the book from the very beginning. So part of what I set out to do was actually have this kind of sort of huge chorus of people in different times. And I think you just have to, I guess whenever you're writing, you have to just try and do your best, I guess, and just make sure that you really are getting this person's voice down, that you know this character before you start trying to do their chapter. Help with me. There's some times when I had a character who would pop up just because it was their turn to show up in the book, but I didn't actually know who they were, so I'd kind of wait 6 months and then go back to that chapter when I actually had figured out who that person was in a more rounded way.
That's great. Yes.
My name is Virginie Michel. My question is for Edwidge, of course. And and I really liked what you did with talking about this in your work and as an imaginative. And I think it does, I appreciate it because I think it does work for Haitian literature, but in an Anglophone context. And I was really struck by what he said and how he used his work in terms of the whole how Jacques Mel, we can't go back to that Jacques Mel because it's a song. My question is, for you as a writer, someone writing Haiti, how do you interact with those sorts of ideas or that sort of legacy that's very current in Haitian literature in the sense of like, you know, my dad's good Haitian, right? And so you go back to good Haitian now, and it's nothing like what it used to be. Haiti is still beautiful and Haiti is still rich, and we know that, but how do you sort of reconcile those things as a writer in your work?
Edwidge?
Well, I first approached them as a person, like as a human being. Like when I said a couple of weeks ago I went and we had buried my aunt who raised me. And in Haiti, if you know, like at the funeral, you're allowed to get as close to it as possible. Like, we could have dressed her if we wanted to, like, but we went to the morgue and everything. And so when I go back, I don't see it. I engage it as a person because I still have people there, and we go places and we do things like, you know, like for Christmas we went to Christmas Mass and Gourmand, and we go to the mountains and like just like that. And I expect it to change because, you know, I went for a long time without going back, and now I go back much more. So I had that big jolting shock where I was surprised that there were certain things, like, you know, when you hear about, like, I was surprised that there were 5 trees in all of Haiti, you know, and then so slowly you just, when I go back, I don't expect it to stay the same just for my benefit, you know. So I know that it's changing, and I know that that's what it is. But I think the problem, like people our age has, is that we have these two very conflicting views of Haiti. You have like your parents' ideal, you know, like their beautiful visions of it, and then you have the stuff you get on the news, and when you go, it's neither really, you know.
The person, yes, ma'am.
My name is Valen Kabuchi. I have a question for both of you. Do you consider yourself a woman writer? And do you consider yourself a man writer? Or you consider yourself writers?
Okay, thank you. Colson? Or do you consider yourself a woman writer?
From like 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. I consider myself a writer, a male writer, sometimes a black male writer. Sometimes I'm the guy who's putting off writing. So I guess there's a lot of sort of guises, I think.
I agree with him.
Yes, right here.
My name is Albert. I want to ask, when you write, do you hear you read?
No. But with those pieces, you know, I'm arranging them in a certain kind of rhythm that makes sense to me. Short sentences, long sentences, sentences that are propelling what slim narrative there is in that book. Some things are just sort of rhyming. So I guess I do kind of hear things sometimes. And I guess when I read them, I'm reading them in a sort of cadence that makes sense to me. It's not like I'm pausing to add in "she said," or like, it's not like a straight fiction where you have to give more clues to different things. With that piece, you're either along for the ride or you're not. And so I guess the rhythm of it is really my own. It's really close to the way I think, I guess. Or so.
Edwidge, you want to? Are you a woman, right?
Oh no, this is
Do you hear yourself?
Do you hear yourself when you read?
You hear yourself.
Do I hear myself? I don't usually hear myself. I try to sort of disappear myself, but I feel very lucky if I can hear if I can hear some kinds of voices, like if I can hear the people. I think for me, when the writing is going the best, like the dreamiest for me, is like when it just feels like I'm taking notes and I can actually hear other voices. But I usually don't want to hear myself. I just want to hear the others.
Audrey.
It gives me an opportunity to test this microphone as well. Welcome home, Colson. As a former Harvard undergraduate, how do you feel that your experiences here, the influences that you've had, have put you on the track to becoming a MacArthur Fellow?
It was all from here. I don't know. I really sort of came to my own as a free-thinking person. I think I was never actually one of these people who knew what was going on. I never knew who the famous professors were. Like, I know Helen Delmer was really famous until I got out. I knew she was like the big person who was teaching the British survey class. But I never knew who all the Rawls. I never knew who any people were. So people always ask me, like, who do you study with? I'm like, I took their class. I never met them. Or they didn't know me. I always sat in the back and didn't say anything. But I think what's good about this place is that it gives you the free range to sort of like do what you want. And like I really discovered the writers who are really important to me here. I think just by having a certain kind of creative encouragement to find my, figure out my own path. I mean, I mentioned Ishmael Reed. Ishmael Reed was being taught here, but someone mentioned him at a talk like this, and I would go to one of the great libraries here, and all his books are there. And you sort of like, just this place really sort of gives you a nice sort of sense of freedom and, I guess, confidence to sort of pursue your own sort of weird stuff. So when I was writing a book about elevator inspectors, which is a really strange thing, and I felt really kind of weird doing it, writing elevators 10 times a day in my computer, I sort of had a kind of like confidence to keep going, even though it was like a freaky enterprise. And I think a lot of that was from here.
Okay, Helen Lee.
Yeah, I was wondering for both of you, in what ways the experience and the sense of yourselves as exiles and also as ones who belong is important to you, or important to being around?
Write that down, Marcus. Go ahead.
A sense of exile and belonging.
Yeah, or how are exile and belonging, those experiences, those sensibilities, the sense of yourself important to being around?
I think definitely that for me that first journey, like leaving what I considered home very early, had a big sense of had sent me on a kind of quest, like on a quest, not just a quest for definition, but a quest of just like of preservation. Like there's so much that I felt when I left Haiti at 12 that I was leaving behind, that I just, and we had, it was like you had to put your whole life suddenly into 2 suitcases, and then you knew you weren't coming back. And so that definitely wanted me to cling to certain things that I had already. And so definitely a sense of preservation, which I think then might have nurtured the desire to become a writer, to put things down. I don't consider myself an exile in the same way that my father did, because we know real exiles who were tortured and so forth. But definitely that first journey, I think for me was the beginning of my path to becoming a writer.
I guess I don't feel as much as consider myself an exile any more than I think all writers are kind of exiles in their own kind of countries or cities, or people are just kind of exiles in rooms. I think there's a lot of exiles in here, even though you're in a big room full of people who are part of your community. In terms of belonging, I think particularly with the New York essays, I am trying to figure out my feelings about the city. I feel really tied to New York City. So part of the work in this book for me was trying to figure out my place in it, especially in the last year and a half since September 11th. The city won't always be there in the same way that I always expected it to be. It's changing. what does that do to my sense of my hometown? How does this wound affect me? And how do I go on as a New Yorker who loves the city and realizes that it might, could disappear at any moment? So I guess that's where I'm at with belonging in my work now, I guess.
And the wound of Haiti, how does it affect you?
Just for Marcus, the wound of Haiti. I think it's a big question because, for example, next year we'll have the bicentennial of Haiti, the 200 years of independence, and we always have this conversation of people. Yes, it's a celebration, but it will be definitely a bittersweet celebration. With all the current problems that we have. So the wound of Haiti, I think it's just it's a walking wound. It's something that you just carry with you, and it's something that even people who want to forget Haiti, there are Haitians who want to forget Haiti, but it just goes with you. Whatever's happening, there's always someone who's calling you and saying, did you hear that the gourds is 55, the dollar is 55 gourds now, and there's always, you just engage with it all the time. So it's not a wound in a way that wounds heal, or I think you would have to think of another. It's not a scar, it's not a wound, but it's something. It's sort of it's something other that you carry. That's always with us.
Yes.
My name is Omar Abdul Malik. Many years ago, I had an opportunity to talk to Hakeem Badabute and Imam Baraka, and they were pushing this whole idea of debunking the idea of art for art's sake versus art for people's sake, and saying that primarily that anything that you do is either for or against yourself, and primarily in a political situation. And what I want to ask the both of you is, do you feel any special responsibility to make political statements or to shape political opinion in your writings?
Okay, I don't feel a duty. I think it's there, in John Henry and Intuitionist. So I think it's just something. I have a certain worldview. It comes across in my work. I don't feel a duty. I don't feel I have to do anything. It's my book. I'm writing it. I'm on it. So no, I guess. In so much as whatever political content there is in my books is just comes from me, and I think it should go in there because I want to talk about it.
Okay. Edwidge?
I think yes and no. I think it's dangerous to give yourself that responsibility. It's an enormous responsibility, but definitely, as Colson said, as a person, you have certain points of views that will come across, and I try, if I have an opinion about something, I'll state it in a more direct way, like in an editorial, we'll find ways to state things directly. And yes, I'm active in ways that I can and issues in my community, but I try not to feel that it has to come from the work. That I think you can separate that can come from me. I can speak about some issues in the community, but I don't want to necessarily give the work that burden of having to speak politically. As I think it does, but I don't want to have to be I don't want it to be to have that job. That's I have to do that.
Last question. So many of you have your hands up. Namal.
My name's Molly. I had an individual question for each of you. For Colson, in the Intuitionist, you seem to be, as Professor Gates would say, signifying on the passing novel. And I was interested in what the influence of that genre was, and also what you feel about the fact that there's sort of a 50-year gap between the last passing novel and your passing novel. There's a few passing novels in there, but there are a few. And for Edwidge, I wanted to ask you, in terms of the oral tradition's influence on your work, what is the hardest or the most difficult thing about capturing elements of the oral tradition in written or reading?
Okay, about passing and the Intuitionist, things serve a pure narrative purpose. Passing in a detective novel is a kind of betrayal, and so it fits into conventions of detective fiction. It's a way of being betrayed, of changing the stakes, of having, in the same way that in more direct genre fiction, people aren't what they seem. Obviously, passing speaks to that. There's a certain kind of like cliched passing novel, which I was sort of like making fun of in certain ways. In some ways, I'm trying to address the idea of passing in the book, and also kind of send it up as a narrative prop, because it is kind of corny when someone's like, "Oh, I got one drop of black blood. Hey, it's okay," or whatever, whatever permutation is. It's a certain, especially the turn of the century, it's such a cliche, and so. It seemed useful as something to talk about and to use as a nuts and bolts storytelling tool, and also as something to comment on.
The challenges of the old tradition in the written work is probably language, because my oral tradition is in another language that I'm so just sharing that in ways that still maintain some of what I hear or some of what I've heard, and creating a way of saying that, like creating a language within the new language of doing that. So that's one of the challenges. For example, to try to write some things, that my grandmother might have said in her Creole in English,
Sense of history, sense of myth, both are concerned, as you can tell already, with exploring deeply the sense of place. It is play of language that is the domain of these two marvelous authors. Postmodern, black, Haitian, African-American, exiles, two profound signifiers. Ladies and gentlemen, Edwidge Danticat.